Right, part 2, starting the dispute process. So I've got on the screen there just some extracts from an original assessment and a reduced assessment that was issued there. You ask why I object to a reduced assessment. We're still not happy with that. There were some questions that SARS had asked and we answered. And the new e-filing system has a drop-down menus for dispute. I didn't include cut and print screens of all of that, but there is a process that follows that thing for us. Okay, so let's look at starting this dispute process. So we now have a taxpayer that is aggrieved with an assessment, as we said in part 1, and we now want to start this dispute process. Remember, in the previous session I also said that we've got those yellow call out things with numbers in them refer to the rules of dispute resolution, very critically important. And then dispute, rule 7, request for reason, rule 6. Those are the ones that we want to deal with. I believe that the first step actually is dealing with tax debt. We have in South Africa the pay now, argue later principle, and if you do not make any arrangement, then the principle is you've got to pay SARS the moment there is an assessment, and they've indicated the day by which payment must be made. Judge Bin's Ward, in one of the Steinhoff cases, so Steinhoff also just helped a little bit with our tax law, says the considerations underpinning the pay now, argue later concept include the public interest in obtaining full and speedy settlement of tax debt. So it's in South Africa's interest that we pay our tax debts in time. But also a need to limit the ability of recalcitrant taxpayers to use objection and appeal process strategically to defer payment of their taxes. So if you say, hey, you know, there's that advert, you get this telephone account of R1 million, and the guy on the other side of the phone say, please pay, we'll refund you if we later fix up the error. I mean, geez, we'll get to that if you can't afford to pay that. The judge said, if you've got an assessment, you must pay. That is the pay now argue principle, and that's why section 164.1 states that unless a senior SARS official otherwise directs the obligation to pay tax and SARS's right to demand repayment of the tax is not suspended by an objection or appeal or pending a decision of the court, etc. So that's the principle at law. And our constitution, this was tested in constitution, Metro Cash and Carry case, pay now, argue later. Right. So, but the act, and this follows from that Metro Carry Cash case, and we've seen that subsequently as well in some other cases come through. If that is absolutely, you know, that R1 million where you really should owe them nothing more than 300 or 400 rand, you can't force the taxpayer to make payment if it's absolutely absurd, right? So therefore the act allows for the taxpayer to request SARS, and now the request is directed at the senior SARS official, to suspend payment of tax or a portion thereof. So you say, look, I've got this R1 million account, I owe you 300 rand, I'll pay you 300 rand, but let's dispute the rest. And if the taxpayer intends to dispute or disputes the liability to pay that tax under Chapter 9. So the law recognizes that pay now, argue later, but if the debt is in dispute, the tax debt, and that would mean if I'm aggrieved with the assessment, it would be, I must be able to request suspension of the debt. And all I need to prove is that I intend to dispute. And we find that SARS says, but where's your dispute? So in practice, we find that when you put in a request for payment, you actually say, but I've already lodged my objection. That sort of seems to make it easier to happen. Section 164 then says, if payment of tax was suspended, and remember Judge Bin's Ward referred to this recalcitrant taxpayer, if you then do not lodge an objection, this confirms that I merely intend to object, or the objection is disallowed and you don't proceed with an appeal, or the appeal is unsuccessful, you now not go to a High Court or the Supreme Court of Appeal, and I'll explain all of that later this morning. The suspension is revoked with immediate effect from the date of expiry of the relevant prescribed time period or any extension of the relevant time period under this Act. So we've got the scenario, an assessment issued by SARS, taxpayer agrees with the assessment, taxpayer wants to dispute that. First step, request suspension of payment. Make certain that we are not caught by SARS officials phoning and say, when are you going to pay today? You need to have some official document in that requests suspension of payment. And actually the e-filing system allows for that now. So you can do the request for suspension of payment through e-filing. If it's not available on e-filing, which I understand often is not there, and that's normally when we are to and froing in the dispute process, that you will then have to lodge a formal request by way of a letter to SARS, because it's not available on the e-filing system. You've got to do it another way. And of course, other taxes, it will not be on e-filing, and you'll do the request there. But critical, first step, take the pressure off the taxpayer by requesting suspension of payment. You are hoping that you'll resolve this and the tax will disappear, or at least part of it will disappear. So do not make the payment to SARS. You don't have to do that. You can request suspension of payment from SARS. And it's not the forum to discuss that, but section 164 and as it follows on is quite clear in how this process and what is required to do that. Now, I said that in all objections, I request reasons for the assessment first before I go any further. So any additional assessment issued by SARS following a verification or audit is probably issued under section 95 of the Tax Administration Act. In part 1, I dealt with that. And this is principally where you haven't provided documents or SARS are not happy with the answers you provided, and then they change what, remember, the process is we submit the return to SARS based on the information that we have. That's true reflection of the thing. SARS now issues an additional assessment based on other information, and that generally happens under section 95, which allows SARS to make an original, additional, reduced based assessment based in whole or in part on an estimate if the taxpayer submits a return or information that's incorrect or inadequate. Now, section 96 deals with assessments, and it says in addition to that assessment, SARS must give the person assessed in respect of this estimated assessment. Section 95 deals with estimated assessments. Must give if it's not fully based on the return submitted by the taxpayer, a statement of grounds for the assessment. Okay, so let me repeat that because I find this is very important to understand. I've submitted a return. I've declared income information in that return, income and expenses. SARS had done some work, issued an additional assessment. This is not based on what I've put in the return. This is subsequent information that they've received. Now they must give me a statement of the ground for the assessment. In our letter of audit finding, we refer to that as proposed grounds for the assessment. Remember the SARS letter of audit finding in part 1 that we dealt with. We need a statement of the ground for the assessment. If it's a jeopardy assessment, of course, why they think the tax is in jeopardy, but we're not dealing with that. So for us, section 96(2)(a) is the important part. Okay, so let's just look at some of the examples of grounds on an assessment. So the law requires of SARS, this is an additional assessment, an IT3A, you see, notice of assessment, but there we see the type of assessment, not original, but additional. And then they say assessment based on information available to SARS. Wow, thanks for telling us. Then they give some further things there. Net employment income, corrected. But, does that work for you? This is one, additional assessment. As you can see, this year, but it was issued to the 2017 year. Now, a couple of months ago, in fact, exactly a month ago when I'm doing this, they say refer to manual letter, grounds for the assessment, adjustment reason refer to manual letter. Value added tax. This one is, I hate it when I see this. Burden of proof not discharged, invalid tax invoice. For me, that's the only reason. Your invoice doesn't meet that. Burden of proof, you can probably convince, like it was in the Jazz Festival case, SARS, that whatever we've got is sufficient there, right? But okay, invalid assessment. Burden of proof not discharged, burden of proof not discharged. Wow, that reason must be more specific for me. So, as is evident from these examples, the grounds of assessments are generally not informative enough. And for me, that's a big problem. And I understand that, the way SARS present this to us on the face of the IT34, that they may not have enough space to put it all in there. And then I agree that they can refer to the letter, to some other manual letter. Just look at what their own guide state. SARS, so they refer to section 96. SARS must, in the case of an assessment described in 95, that's that, insufficient information or not fully based on the return submitted by the taxpayer, and it shouldn't be an or there, but issue a statement of the grounds of assessment. So that's what the law requires. Grounds here generally mean SARS must provide the grounds that enable the taxpayer to determine what has been decided, when, by whom, and what factual and legal basis that person had for doing so. And just shortly after this, SARS refers to that Judge Sponnin's decision in that Pretoria East case, where he said this is the only way you can fairly deal with the taxpayer. So this is a SARS guide that tells us that these grounds must be a little bit more than that one-liner, burden of proof, not discharge. It should be noted that under our administrative law, grounds for a decision are generally not as extensive as reasons for the decision. I agree with SARS on that one. A lot of people don't, and I'll explain a little bit on that. Not all adverse decisions would be disputed, thus an obligation to provide adequate reasons with every decision would be too administratively burdensome. No, that's absolute nonsense. SARS is acting, they are issuing their grounds for that, but the reasons, yes, maybe that I can sit. So it's absolutely critical that